Oh!
15.2, 15.4, 15.6, 15.8. 2 for a pair is 10, and 6 for runs is 16.
It turns out we were playing...
I've got 10 to spare. This is the Rogue One rules.
We were playing Rogue One. We were not playing Evoke.
No.
Hi, this is Big Geek and I'm Dan, and I'm trying something a little bit different with this video. A little bit of a live voiceover of the edited finished thing. We'll see how that goes. So this was my project before Christmas. I made this for a Secret Santa gift. It is a Star Wars themed cribbage board. And as you can see here, the first thing I did obviously was model it up in CAD. I did a lot of this on my live stream, CAD like nobody's watching. And the trickiest part of this really was just the maths involved in figuring out how wide a diameter I needed to fit the holes. I knew I needed 121 holes per track, and I kind of wanted to make not a huge package, and I based everything off of the size of peg that I thought I would be able to make on the lathe in wood reliably, and then work up from there about what sort of spacing I thought I needed for the drill. And used some maths. I wish I could tell you that I knew that off the top of my head, but I found a website to help me with that, and calculated the diameter of the circle I needed, and then kind of from there was able to do some circular layout with the Fusion 360, and then a whole load of mirroring jobs to get all of the holes I needed all the way around. And I tweaked things to fit within those 2 logo drops, which were pretty easy, and then pretty much just cam up all of that into initially a drill path, which obviously was kind of the first critical thing I wanted to see happen, make sure that all of those holes were drilled neatly. Ran that at a pretty low RPM to make sure I didn't burn the wood whilst that drilling happened, and then kind of profiled out everything that was required. The idea here was that there was sort of a sloping up kind of path from each side, so the peg for each player would start kind of low down next to their base, and you would then spiral up over the middle and back in, spiraling into the center of the enemy base. And that was sort of the idea, the thinking behind the design. The CNC probably took 2 or 3 hours of runtime in the end to drill all those holes, pocket out everything, which went quite well, but then obviously a lot of the finishing was by hand. As you can see, I masked off the logo areas for both sides to spray them judiciously to get good coverage of the color I needed. It took quite a long time to cut out that masking around the Imperial logo, try and keep everything as crisp as I could in order to not get some overspray. Then I moved over here to the lathe. To shape the pegs. Each side needs 2 pegs. Actually, initially I thought I might just do 1 peg, so this video shows me just creating the 1 set, but I did end up making a pair for each side, which is traditional in cribbage. You use 1 to mark the back position and then 1 to mark the front position of your score. So as you can see, this is quite a delicate operation. Again, to fit that many holes, you need to be quite small, and so you're working with quite low radiuses. And I was trying to keep this from snapping on me whilst I was working. You can see I kind of started from the furthest point away from the chuck and worked my way backwards in order to get the most support as I was working down. And just try and get a rough standing. And I had this idea that I wanted to spray the colors of each side on the head, so that's why there's like a distinct marking there of the head end of each peg, so that I could spray them, which I did just straight on the lathe. Now, confessional, whilst I am showing here the spraying, I ended up, I think, almost completely wiping this paint off and doing it again separately. But this was pretty much the theory, which just like mask it off and then spray with the lathe running to get me a nice even coverage. And then using a supporting piece of wood, use the bandsaw just to cut those off and do some final sanding and such to finish them. As you can see, the final spray job on those is a little different to the one you just saw, but that's pretty much how it worked. And then pulled off all of the masking once the paint was dry on the board and cut it out. So up to now, I think things going pretty smoothly as I expected. I did make a bit of a mistake. You can probably see there there's some overspray. I hadn't really masked the whole board properly, so I made a bit of work for myself in having to clean that up after the fact. Had I thought a bit more about it at the time, I probably could have done a better job of masking and then not had so much cleanup sanding to do. Spent quite a bit of time with a file trying to just like clean up those edges off the CNC machine. I guess I don't have quite enough rigidity. There was a little bit of a bumpy exterior surface to those curves, which I just sort of cleaned up by hand. Here you can see me over at the drill press. Spent a little while thinking about exactly how I was going to store the pegs. This is quite a thin board. This was quite a bit more tricky than I, again, would necessarily have liked. But the theory here was drill a pivot pin hole in through the end and cut these little legs or doors off, I guess. And I had the idea that I would basically have a pivot pin in and a magnet recessed into both the door and the base that would then hold it shut. Now, unfortunately, the magnets I had were super close to the entire thickness that I had to work with, and so as you see, I split one. I ended up having to super glue that all in place and get it closed again. I ended up doing all right, but it would have been nice to work with a bit more thickness here, I think, if I was going to make this again. Again, I'm sort of working with very tight tolerances here as I'm trying to create enough of a hole in through the end grain to store the pegs for each side. So the theory is that there's essentially what I was calling a hanger on each side of the board for the pegs of each team. So I sort of drilled initially all the way to depth with a bit just enough to fit the main shaft, and then just widened out the top enough to get the tops in. And here you can see me creating the hinge pin for each door. So this was just a bamboo skewer that was close to the right thickness, and I just chucked it in the drill to sand it down to the diameter I needed. Poked it in, sanded off the end. It worked really well as a pivot pin. I was quite happy with that. And the magnets help to close everything quite tightly. Oh, sorry about that camera work. That's a little bit, a bit alarming. And then finish everything off with a nice clear coat that gives us a good handleable surface. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Went quite well. I quite like the way the doors on each side work and that the pegs fit. There's a nice loose kind of fitting there. They fall out neatly without too much effort. It's a bit of fun playing Cribbage on a slightly different type of board. Normally the parallel lines, but I quite enjoyed this idea of combat Cribbage, being able to race to the center of your opponent's base. I was almost sad to give this away as a present. I may yet have to make another one for myself. As you can see, 2 pegs apiece, and we did eventually, before I gave it away, did have to give it a quick trial run as we played through. I was playing the Rebels against the Imperial Overlords, but sadly, as you saw at the beginning of this video, I was not successful. And of course, the cat had to come and get involved. Whenever there is a center of attention that is not a cat, the cat finds a way to get involved. So there you go. That was this project. I figured I'd do it as this voiceover because as cool as the end result is, it wasn't. There's not much to it beyond the original CAD design, which I didn't record a great deal of. Well, that was Star Wars Combat Cribbage. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.